Hello, friends! In today's video we will talk about what is wrong with the claimed losses of the enemy, but first let's go over the latest changes on the front. The Russians have advanced east of Kostiantynivka, reports the Ukrainian military telegram channel DeepState. Also, for 2 days in a row, the Russians have been advancing north of Kupiansk in the area of Synkivka. I will remind you, a counter-offensive operation of the armed forces of Ukraine has been going on around Kupiansk and in the city itself for the last months after the Russians reached the west of Kupiansk, creating a threat of its encirclement. At that time, part of the city's districts were retaken and the logistics of the Russian troops who were in Kupiansk were disrupted. At the same time, judging by the DeepState map, the Russian presence in Kupiansk remains, as does its connection with the main forces. In addition, the Russians, as we see, have begun to advance to the northeast of the city, where the front until recently practically did not move. The Ministry of Defense of Russia stated today the capture of the village of Ozerne in the Lyman direction. According to DeepState, the village is partially in the gray zone, otherwise under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine. Also, the Ministry of Defense of Russia claims the capture of the village of Tatutine in the Sumy region to the east of Sumy. According to Ukrainian monitoring telegram channels, battles are going on the eastern outskirts of the settlement. Yesterday, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Syrskyi, reported that Russia has intensified the offensive practically along the entire front line. According to him, the situation remains difficult. At the same time, Syrskyi claims that Ukraine is inflicting losses on Russia that exceed the capabilities for replenishing units. Let's analyze the moment with the Russian losses in more detail. So, for several months now, the Ukrainian authorities have been stating that the losses of Russian troops have reached the highest level since the beginning of the war. The first to state this back in January was Minister of Defense Fedorov, who said that in December the losses of Russians killed and seriously wounded amounted to 35,000. According to him, this was a record. On April 3rd, Zelenskyy stated that in March the Russians had the highest level of losses since the beginning of the war. However, he cited approximately the same figure as in December, more than 35,000. But something else is interesting. The March figure named by Zelenskyy does not correspond to the data of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. According to the agency, as of April 1st, the Russians had 1,298,730 dead and wounded, and a month earlier, on March 1st, 1,266,770 people were mentioned. That is, the difference was 31,960 people and not more than 35,000, as Zelenskyy stated. Moreover, all these figures are not records at all. If we proceed from the data of the General Staff of Ukraine from a year ago, from December 2024 to March 2025. According to the General Staff, for the previous December, the Russians lost 48,670 people, for January 48,240, for February 36,570, and for March 41,160. That is much more than this winter and spring. In fact, if you believe the agency, Russian losses in the last winter-spring season approached 50,000 a month. And now they, on the contrary, have sharply decreased to approximately 30,000. If we compare the total losses of Russia for both periods, then they fall this winter, and taking March into account, according to the General Staff, amounted to 28.5%. Of course, it must be understood that all the above figures are very conditional and may not reflect even the real dynamics of losses, not to mention the exact number. First, although drones allow for more or less accurate determination of the number of cases of manpower engagement directly in the kill zone on the front line, it is not always possible to accurately determine the result of the engagement, whether the soldier is killed, seriously or not very seriously wounded, and will soon return to duty. Second, in any war, the enemy's losses are always overstated and one's own are understated. This is an axiom proven over centuries, and it is unlikely that in the current war they suddenly decided to depart from this tradition. Therefore, all statements about losses from any of the warring sides should first of all be perceived not as real statistics, but as an element of information warfare. And from this point of view, the statement of Zelenskyy and Fedorov about record losses of the Russian army is quite understandable. I will remind you that the key task of the Ukrainian leadership now is to convince the West, and especially the USA President Donald Trump, that Kyiv is ready to effectively contain Russia in Ukraine, and therefore there is no need to give all of Donbass to Russia, which it is achieving in negotiations with USA support. As part of this strategy, since the end of last year, Zelenskyy and Fedorov began to promote the thesis of inflicting critical damage on the enemy and state that Ukraine's goal is to reach 50,000 killed Russians per month. Then they began to report almost monthly that Russia's losses had begun to grow unprecedentedly, as if making it clear that the stated plan of 50,000 was not far away. But as we see, this does not correspond even to the indicators of the Ukrainian General Staff, although, of course, its data should not be taken as extremely accurate estimates either. And one more thing regarding losses. The Russian side, in turn, claims that the armed forces of Ukraine suffer much larger losses than the Russians, which is also indicated by the number of bodies of the dead during exchange. During exchanges, Russia hands over to Ukraine manifoldly more bodies than it receives back. However, there is an explanation for this. Such a difference is explained by the fact that Russian troops are advancing, and consequently, the battlefield remains behind them. True, as the Ukrainian military political leadership states, the armed forces of Ukraine have also been conducting an offensive for several months now, liberating hundreds of square kilometers of territory. And Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi previously stated the interception of the initiative on the front, but so far the ratio of the bodies handed over to each other does not change. Friends, as you can see, my channel is gaining very few views, so I receive practically nothing from monetization. If you like my videos and you have the opportunity to support me financially, I would be very grateful to you. Thank you, and see you in the next video.